Quick question, if a 600-kilo predator pops up 40 meters away, do you know the one move that buys you 3 seconds? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Polar bears aren't movie monsters. They're problem solvers. And when they come in, it's usually not to scare you. It's to test if you're food. One camper was literally dragged from his tent by the head, and a single flare made the bear drop him. In a town street, a 69-year-old with nothing but a shovel struck a bear in the eye and saved a stranger. These aren't campfire stories. They're playbooks written in blood and adrenaline. We're not guessing our way through this. For the next hour, we'll keep it clean, scientific, and human. How polar bears think, the body language tells that matter. What actually stops a charge at 10 meters. And the one mistake that turns curiosity into a kill attempt. Field data, case files from Svalbard to Hudson Bay, tactics used by researchers and Arctic guides, broken down in plain English you can remember when your hands are shaking. Stick with me and you all leave with the 3 signs you were being sized up as prey. A camp layout that turns midnight visits into false starts. The split-second spray versus flare decision. Why play dead is the worst advice here. And, if it goes hands-on, the only 2 places to hit that make a polar bear rethink you. If you work, travel, or dream in the high north, you deserve this edge. Let's get you polar bear proof before something white appears on your horizon. Polar bear distribution is circumpolar. They inhabit Arctic regions of Alaska, Canada, Greenland, Svalbard, Norway, and Russia, with their movements tightly correlated to the seasonal presence of sea ice. Sea ice is the critical platform that allows them to hunt their primary prey, seals. For this reason, polar bear territory cannot be defined as a fixed area on land. Instead, it is a dynamic system that expands and contracts with ice cover. Understanding where encounters are most likely requires knowledge of both geography and seasonal ice dynamics. During late winter and spring, sea ice is extensive. Polar bears are distributed across offshore pack ice, especially along the marginal ice zone where seal densities are highest. In this period, human-bear conflicts are relatively uncommon because bears are well-fed and concentrated far from settlements. The situation changes dramatically in summer. As temperatures rise, the ice breaks up and retreats. Bears are forced toward shorelines or stranded on land for months at a time. This ice-free season is when most dangerous encounters with humans occur. Bears are in caloric deficit, relying on fat reserves, and any unusual odor or sound may trigger investigative behavior. This pattern is evident across the Arctic. In western Hudson Bay, hundreds of bears gather near Churchill each autumn awaiting freeze-up. In Svalbard, bears move onto land and approach tent camps. In Chukotka, Russia, they enter coastal villages. Terrain strongly influences bear movements. Barrier islands and gravel spits provide efficient travel corridors. Bears use them as natural highways when moving between feeding areas, and these landforms often intersect with human campsites. Estuaries and river mouths are especially high-risk zones. They concentrate fish, waterfowl, and marine carcasses, and the humid microclimate carries scent more effectively. Researchers and hunters working in these areas must assume regular bear traffic. On the sea ice, ridges created by colliding flows form hummocks and pressure walls. These structures provide concealment, allowing bears to remain undetected until very close. On land, certain slopes and snowdrifts become maternity denning sites for pregnant females. While den encounters are rare, they represent one of the few contexts in which polar bears behave defensively rather than predatory. Carcass sites are focal points of bear activity. A single whale carcass can attract dozens of individuals and hold them for weeks. Smaller carcasses, such as walrus or seal remains, also draw repeated visits. These areas are especially hazardous because bears may approach from multiple directions and remain unpredictable once food competition begins. From a management perspective, keeping human activity away from carcass sites is one of the most effective ways to reduce conflict. Human settlements and outposts create artificial attractants. Polar bears quickly learn to exploit garbage dumps, fish processing sites, and poorly secured camps. Once rewarded, their behavior becomes reinforced, and they return with decreasing wariness. Churchill has developed extensive bear management systems, including patrols, deterrent rounds, and temporary holding facilities. Smaller field camps lack these resources, but they still produce attractant cues: food storage, waste pits, diesel odor, or gray water discharge. Long-term camps almost guarantee eventual bear inspection. Weather conditions further complicate detection. Wind determines how scent disperses. In steady crosswinds, bears quarter systematically until they intercept odor plumes. In gusty conditions, scent breaks into pockets, producing sudden encounters at close range. Fog reduces visibility and muffles sound, making both detection and deterrence harder. Blowing snow creates visual noise that obscures large animals. Even bright sunlight can be problematic, as glare on ice masks contrast and renders a white bear nearly invisible until proximity is dangerous. The interplay of terrain and weather defines what can be called the detection radius, the effective distance at which humans and bears become aware of each other. Mode of travel changes exposure risk. On foot, humans produce strong scent trails but little noise, making them more susceptible to surprise encounters. Standard practice is periodic scanning, especially downwind. Snowmobiles generate loud acoustic signatures, which may reduce surprise events, but they leave strong scent trails and reduce human awareness at speed. Encounters over blind ridges are a recognized hazard. Sled dogs provide early detection through olfaction, but are also an attractant. Improperly managed dogs have been attacked or consumed by bears, creating additional risk. Even marine travel is not exempt. Boats operating near shore leave odor plumes that can be carried onto land, increasing the likelihood of attracting bears to landing sites. Campsite selection is a critical variable. Best practice is to position sleeping areas with a physical barrier at the rear, cliff, slope, or open water, and long sightlines forward. Food preparation and storage should be separated from sleeping quarters and positioned downwind. Natural bear corridors such as spits, estuaries, or tidal flats should be avoided. On sea ice, escape routes to land must be planned. On shore, retreat options should be mapped in advance. Physical deterrents such as electric fences or tripwire alarms provide only limited security, but can add reaction time. In documented incidents, 30 seconds of early warning has been the difference between orderly deterrence and direct attack. Temporal patterns also matter. While bears may be active at any hour, they are more likely to travel during cooler periods of the day, late evening, night, and early morning. Unfortunately, these coincide with the lowest human vigilance. Many fatal encounters in Svalbard, for example, have occurred in pre-dawn hours when expedition members were asleep. Night watches, alarm systems, and accessible deterrents are recommended during these times. Field heuristics provide practical guidelines. In coastal areas during autumn, always assume a bear is nearby, even if unseen. Within several kilometers of bone piles, dumps, or fishing activity, risk is elevated. Fresh tracks angled into the wind suggest active hunting. Concentrations of gulls or ravens often indicate a carcass, and thus bear presence. Dogs exhibiting focused attention downwind should be taken as reliable indicators of bears. The most important interpretive rule is that polar bear curiosity should not be misread as harmless. A bear approaching from downwind with its head elevated is conducting a predatory assessment. It is gathering information before deciding whether to commit to an attack. Human response must immediately shift that cost-benefit calculation. A well-organized group, a camp free of food attractants, and visible deterrents all increase the energy cost to the bear, making it more likely to disengage. In summary, polar bear territory is dynamic. It is defined not by fixed geography, but by the interaction of ice cover, prey availability, terrain corridors, weather, and human activity. Risk to humans peaks in late summer and autumn when bears are forced ashore and food is scarce. High-risk zones include barrier islands, estuaries, carcass sites, and areas near human settlements or camps. Environmental factors such as wind and fog reduce detection distances, while travel mode and campsite management directly influence encounter outcomes. For anyone operating in polar bear habitat, understanding these variables is not optional. It is the foundation of survival. Polar bears are apex predators, but they are also highly specialized carnivores whose survival depends on strict energy economics. Unlike omnivorous brown or black bears, which can sustain themselves on berries, roots, or carrion, polar bears depend almost entirely on high-fat prey such as seals. This dietary specialization shapes their behavior, and it explains why their interactions with humans are both less frequent and potentially more dangerous. To understand why polar bears attack humans, we must examine the ecological triggers, behavioral mechanisms, and documented patterns that underlie such events. The first and most obvious factor is hunger. Polar bears live in an environment where food availability fluctuates dramatically. During the prime hunting season on the ice, bears can thrive, building fat reserves. But during the ice-free months, particularly in places like western Hudson Bay, they endure long fasting periods. Scientific studies show that adult males can lose more than a kilogram of body mass per day while stranded on land. As their reserves deplete, the incentive to take risks grows. A hungry bear will investigate new stimuli, unfamiliar scents, movements, or noises, if there is even a small chance of gaining calories. This investigative behavior, when directed at humans, often looks like curiosity, but in biological terms, it is the early stage of predatory assessment. Another key factor is opportunity. Polar bears do not actively seek humans as a staple prey, but they are opportunistic predators. If a person is alone, moving erratically, or asleep in a tent without deterrence, a bear may test the situation. Unlike bluff charges seen in brown bears, polar bears rarely waste energy. If they approach, it is usually with intent. The attack is not a display of dominance. It is an attempt to solve an energy problem. Documented cases support this. In Svalbard, several fatal incidents involved bears entering unprotected tents at night, treating sleeping humans as potential prey items. Age and sex also influence attack probability. Subadult bears, recently independent from their mothers, often lack the hunting skill to catch seals consistently. These younger bears are overrepresented in human encounters because they are desperate learners, more willing to experiment with new food sources. Similarly, Older bears in poor condition may turn to scavenging or predatory testing of unfamiliar targets. Adult females with cubs present a different risk category. While they usually avoid humans, they will attack if they perceive a threat to their cubs. Unlike predatory attacks, which are deliberate and often prolonged, defensive attacks by mothers are typically explosive and brief, aimed at neutralizing the perceived danger. Curiosity is often misinterpreted. A bear standing on its hind legs, sniffing or circling at a distance is not being playful. It is analyzing. Polar bears use olfactory and visual cues to decide whether to escalate. From a biological perspective, this is a risk-benefit calculation. Is the potential reward worth the energy cost and danger of engagement? In most cases, bears withdraw once they identify humans as difficult targets. Attacks occur when hunger or inexperience skews this calculation toward risk-taking. There are also environmental conditions that elevate the likelihood of conflict. Poor ice years, when freeze-up is delayed or breakup comes early, strand more bears on land for longer periods. Climate data show that in western Hudson Bay, the ice-free season has lengthened by several weeks over recent decades, directly increasing the duration of fasting. This translates to more hungry bears near settlements and higher encounter rates. Similarly, carcass sites, such as whale remains near villages, act as focal points for both bears and humans, raising the chance of dangerous overlap. Human behavior can exacerbate risks. Improper waste management, unsecured food storage, and predictable routines all condition bears to associate people with resources. Once a bear is rewarded with food, its natural caution decreases, and subsequent encounters become more dangerous. This pattern has been documented repeatedly in Churchill, where problem bears are sometimes relocated or held in specialized facilities. In remote camps, even a single careless incident, such as leaving fish scraps or diesel-soaked materials exposed, can condition a bear to return. Another element is surprise. While predatory attacks are calculated, startled bears may lash out defensively. This is less common than in brown bears, because polar bears are more likely to detect humans first. Still, a bear suddenly disturbed at close range, perhaps near a kill or a den, may attack to eliminate what it perceives as an immediate threat. These attacks are rare but important to acknowledge. Scientific documentation shows that attacks are not random, they follow patterns. A review of recorded polar bear incidents reveals that the majority involved nutritionally stressed animals, often males or subadults, during ice-free seasons. Attacks were most likely to occur at night, in camps without deterrents or when people were isolated. The mechanism is consistent. A bear approaches, assesses, and if deterrents are absent or ineffective, escalates to direct physical contact. It is crucial to contrast this with brown bear behavior. Brown bears often bluff charge or display aggression to defend food or territory. Polar bears, in contrast, do not waste energy on displays. If they close the distance, it is generally purposeful. This difference makes polar bear encounters particularly dangerous, because the line between approach and attack is thinner. Conservationists emphasize that most encounters do not end in attack. Bears are highly sensitive to energy balance and will disengage if the cost is too high. Deterrents like flares, bear spray, or organized group behavior often convince a bear to abandon its approach. But the underlying truth remains: polar bears attack humans primarily when ecological pressure, hunger, scarcity, or opportunity overrides their caution. Case studies highlight these principles. In 2011 in Svalbard, a starving subadult male attacked a group of young campers, killing one and injuring others. The bear had been in poor condition, wandering long distances onshore without food. In contrast, in Hudson Bay, defensive encounters have occurred when humans unknowingly approached mothers with cubs near den sites. The outcomes differ, one predatory, one defensive, but both underscore the importance of context. In summary, polar bears attack humans for three main reasons: predation driven by hunger or inexperience, opportunism when humans are accessible and unprotected, and defense when cubs are threatened or a bear is startled. These attacks are not acts of aggression for their own sake, but the product of evolutionary pressures in a harsh environment. Understanding these drivers is essential. It allows biologists to predict risk periods, design management strategies, and educate travelers on prevention. In polar bear country, awareness of why attacks happen is the foundation of staying alive. Polar bear attacks on humans are rare, but when they occur, they are often severe and instructive. Each incident provides biologists, conservationists, and Arctic travelers with critical data: the context of the attack, the behavior of the bear, and the responses that either saved or cost lives. By examining real cases across different regions of the Arctic, we gain not only harrowing narratives but also practical lessons for survival and prevention. One of the most studied incidents took place in Svalbard in 2011. A group of British students and their guides had set up camp on the Von Post Glacier. They followed standard procedures but did not have adequate deterrent systems in place. Electric fences and trip alarms were either missing or ineffective. In the early hours of the morning, a 17-year-old male polar bear entered the camp. The bear dragged one teenager from his tent, killing him, and injured several others before being shot by a survivor. Investigators later determined that the bear was in poor condition, having been stranded on land without adequate food. The lessons here were clear. Hungry subadults are high risk, Night hours are particularly dangerous, and early warning systems can mean the difference between escape and tragedy. This event triggered new regulations in Svalbard, requiring organized groups to carry deterrents such as flares and firearms when camping outside settlements. Another well-documented case occurred in 2018 near the remote settlement of Pyramiden, also in Svalbard. A polar bear attacked a German cruise ship worker who had gone ashore with a landing party. Despite being armed, the group had only a small number of deterrents ready. When the bear closed in, the man was mauled before colleagues shot the animal. He survived with injuries, but the incident highlighted two critical points. Firearms are not foolproof unless carried ready for immediate use, and bears investigating human groups at close quarters can escalate faster than expected. The broader lesson emphasized by Arctic field managers was the importance of layered defense, visible deterrence. Like flares and noise devices should be deployed before relying on lethal force. Churchill, Manitoba, nicknamed the polar bear capital of the world, offers numerous examples that illustrate different patterns of attack. In one case from the 1980s, a polar bear entered town and attacked multiple people during the night. Several were injured before law enforcement killed the bear. Analysis showed that overflowing dumps and poorly managed waste had drawn the bear repeatedly into the town, conditioning it to seek food among humans. Since then, Churchill has instituted strict garbage management and created the Polar Bear Jail, a holding facility where nuisance bears are confined before relocation. The key lesson here is that human behavior, specifically food management, directly influences bear aggression. By removing attractants, entire communities have reduced the frequency of attacks. Another striking case occurred in Canada's Nunavut territory in 2018, when a father and his children were attacked while out on the land near Arviat. The bear fatally mauled the father before being shot by another hunter. In this case, the bear was later described as an adult male in poor condition, again reflecting the theme that nutritionally stressed bears are more prone to attack humans as potential prey. Survivors reported that the bear's approach was silent and purposeful, no bluff charges or warning displays, reinforcing what biologists already know. When a polar bear commits to contact, it is rarely a defensive bluff, but a serious attempt to subdue. Not all stories end in tragedy. In 2006, a woman in Point Lay, Alaska, was walking near her home when a polar bear charged her. Armed only with a shovel, she struck the animal on the nose and eyes. The bear retreated, and she survived with minor injuries. Researchers have long noted that the face, particularly eyes and nose, is among the few sensitive areas where humans can cause enough discomfort to deter an attack. While no one recommends close combat as a strategy, this event demonstrates that quick, targeted action can disrupt predatory escalation long enough for help to arrive. An additional case from the Chukotka region of Russia shows the role of group size. In 2019, a polar bear entered a village where a group of people confronted it together. By shouting, using vehicles to block its path, and eventually firing deterrent shots, the group drove the animal away without casualties. Biologists reviewing the case emphasize the value of collective defense. Polar bears are less likely to press an attack against an organized group than a solitary human, since the perceived risk is higher. This aligns with field recommendations. When traveling in bear country, move in groups whenever possible. From these diverse accounts, several patterns emerge. First, many of the attacking bears were in poor physical condition, often stranded on shore during extended ice-free periods. This supports ecological data showing that as climate change prolongs the fasting season, nutritionally stressed bears are more likely to view humans as potential prey. Second, attacks often occurred at night or in low-visibility conditions when humans were least prepared. Survivors repeatedly report that bears approached silently and with intent. Third, the absence or failure of deterrence is a recurring theme. Electric fences, motion alarms, and flares, when properly used, provide critical reaction time. In nearly every case where these tools were missing, the results were worse. Each case also reveals something about human response. In some incidents, immediate and coordinated action, whether with firearms, flares, or improvised weapons, saved lives. In others, hesitation or lack of readiness led to fatalities. Survivors often describe the speed of escalation. What seemed like curiosity one moment became physical attack the next. The takeaway is that travelers in polar bear habitat must treat every approach as potentially predatory until proven otherwise. For zoologists and field researchers, these stories are more than cautionary tales. They are data points confirming behavioral theories, that subadults and starving adults are more likely to test humans as prey, that bears conditioned to human food sources are more dangerous, and that defensive attacks from mothers with cubs are rare but explosive. For travelers and residents, they serve as practical guides. Avoid attractants, use layered deterrents, maintain group cohesion, and never underestimate a bear's willingness to escalate. Real-life encounters underscore the central truth. Polar bears do not attack humans at random. Every case reflects a biological driver: hunger, opportunity, or defense. Survivors who recognized those signals, responded quickly, or had protective systems in place walked away. Those who did not often paid the highest price. By studying these stories, we can transform individual tragedies into collective knowledge, reducing risk for everyone who lives in or visits polar bear country. The most effective way to survive a polar bear encounter is to prevent it from happening in the first place. Every case study of attacks, every dataset collected by biologists and field researchers, underscores one simple fact: preparation is the first line of defense. A polar bear is not a problem you solve once it has closed the distance. By then, the outcome depends on seconds. Survival begins long before you step onto Arctic terrain, with planning, equipment, awareness, and discipline. Preparation starts with knowledge. Before entering polar bear habitat, it is essential to understand where you are going and when. Seasonal ice dynamics dictate bear presence and behavior. For example, in Churchill, Canada, the risk is highest in autumn, when bears gather along the shore waiting for Hudson Bay to freeze. In Svalbard, tents pitched during summer on ice-free land are inherently at higher risk, because hungry bears are present and investigating. Even scientists accustomed to this environment prepare by studying local bear movement data, consulting with wildlife officers, and assessing recent sightings. The first step of prevention is to anticipate whether bears are likely to be present in the area and season you intend to travel. Travel planning also matters. Group size is a critical variable. Field studies show that bears are less likely to approach organized groups than solitary individuals. A lone human is an easy test case. A coordinated group presents a higher risk for the predator. For this reason, expeditions, research teams, and guided tours are almost always conducted in groups. When separation is unavoidable, strict protocols ensure visibility and communication are maintained. Next is equipment. In bear country, deterrents are not optional. They are as essential as food or shelter. The hierarchy of defense begins with early warning systems. Motion-triggered alarms, tripwires with flares, or portable electric fences are widely used by Arctic scientists. These systems create both a physical and psychological barrier. A fence may not physically stop a determined bear, but the discomfort and noise it produces usually persuade the animal to withdraw. More importantly, it buys time. 30 seconds of warning can allow a group to assemble, arm deterrents, and prepare a coordinated response. Beyond alarms, visible deterrents such as flares, noisemakers, and cracker shells serve a crucial function. Studies of bear behavior show that loud, sudden stimuli disrupt approach behavior. When deployed early, while the bear is still at a distance, these deterrents often convince the animal to abandon its investigation. The mistake many victims make is waiting too long. A bear that has already committed to a close-range approach is harder to deter. Preventive deployment is far more effective. Firearms are sometimes discussed as a last resort. In regions like Svalbard, they are legally required for groups traveling outside settlements. However, research and case analyses emphasize that firearms should never be the primary or only defensive tool. Bears are large, resilient animals, and even accurate shots may not stop an immediate charge. More importantly, the psychological barrier of deterrence, flares, alarms, spray, can prevent escalation altogether. Firearms are a necessary failsafe, but the first line of defense is always prevention. Personal preparation is equally important. Travelers in bear country must discipline themselves to manage scent and food. Polar bears' olfactory capabilities are extraordinary, and they can detect carrion or food from kilometers away. Leaving fish scraps, food wrappers, or waste exposed is equivalent to ringing a dinner bell. Best practice is to store food in airtight containers, separate from sleeping areas, and downwind from camp. Cooking should never be done inside tents, and waste must be packed out or secured. Field researchers frequently establish two camps within one site, a sleeping camp and a cooking camp, placed well apart. Physical layout of camps also reduces risk. Tents should be arranged with clear sightlines and without blind spots where bears could approach unnoticed. Equipment should be stored in ways that do not create visual cover. In larger groups, designated night watches are often established, especially in regions or seasons with high bear density. While alarms and fences add security, a vigilant human presence remains one of the most reliable deterrents. Clothing and gear choices can also play a role. Brightly colored tents and clothing increase visibility, reducing the chance of surprise at close range. Carrying deterrents on the body, not stored in a bag, ensures readiness. Survivors of attacks often report that deterrents were unavailable in the crucial seconds when the bear appeared. The rule is simple: equipment only works if it is accessible. Preventive strategy also extends to behavior in the field. When moving across terrain, travelers should avoid high-risk areas identified in previous sections, carcass sites, estuaries, or known bear corridors, especially in poor visibility. Travel should be conducted in daylight when possible, and in constant wind awareness, recognizing that moving downwind of potential bear areas increases the chance of detection. When stopping, even briefly, group members should scan the environment systematically. This is not paranoia. It is standard practice in an ecosystem where humans are not the apex species. Education is another layer of prevention. Many accidents occur because travelers underestimate polar bears or misinterpret their behavior. A bear approaching slowly is not curious in the harmless sense. It is testing. Understanding that even investigative approaches are predatory assessments allows humans to respond with seriousness and consistency. Tour operators, research teams, and indigenous communities often conduct training sessions that simulate encounters, teaching people to deploy deterrence quickly and without hesitation. Preparation also involves emergency planning. Even with all precautions, encounters can occur. Groups should establish clear roles: who deploys deterrence first, who handles firearms if necessary, who communicates with the outside world. Radios or satellite phones must be tested and accessible. First aid kits should be equipped to handle trauma, not just minor injuries, as polar bear attacks are often severe. Practicing these protocols in advance reduces hesitation during real events. The cumulative lesson from decades of Arctic fieldwork is that prevention is not one action, but a layered system. Knowledge of bear ecology reduces exposure. Group travel reduces vulnerability. Alarms and fences provide early warning. Flares and noise deter from a distance. Firearms, carried as a last resort, provide a fail-safe. Food discipline removes the strongest attractant. Camp design, visibility, and human vigilance reduce the chance of surprise. Emergency protocols prepare for worst-case scenarios. Each layer compensates for the limitations of the others. Together, they transform a dangerous environment into one that can be managed. Ultimately, preparation is not just about safety, it is about respect. Polar bears are not villains or monsters. They are predators operating within their ecological logic, driven by hunger and opportunity. Humans who enter their range carry the responsibility to minimize conflict, for their own survival and for the protection of the bears themselves. Every prevented attack is not only a human life saved, but a bear spared from being shot in defense. Prevention is conservation. In polar bear country, your first line of defense is not strength or bravery. It is preparation. Knowing the rhythms of ice and hunger, traveling in groups carrying deterrence, managing food, and treating every approach with seriousness. Those who prepare walk away with stories and data. Those who do not risk becoming another cautionary tale. Seeing a polar bear in the wild is unlike any other wildlife encounter. It is not a distant view of a grazing herbivore or even a wary predator that prefers to avoid you. A polar bear is an apex carnivore that regards every moving object as a potential part of its environment to be investigated, tested, and sometimes pursued. How you react in the first moments of an encounter often determines whether the situation ends safely or escalates into danger. The first rule is recognition. Many encounters begin before the bear is aware of you. Perhaps you spot it at a distance, walking the shoreline or moving across the ice. In that moment, your advantage is time. If the bear has not detected you, quietly and deliberately increase distance. There is no benefit in waiting to see what it does. Experienced field researchers emphasize that avoidance is the safest strategy. Changing direction to move crosswind or retreating to cover reduces the chance the bear will pick up your scent trail. If you are with a group, gather everyone immediately so you do not appear as scattered, vulnerable individuals. But often the situation begins differently. The bear has already seen, smelled, or heard you and is orienting toward your position. This is the critical juncture. Polar bears rarely bluff. If a bear begins to approach, it is conducting an assessment. Biologists describe this as a predatory test. The bear is trying to determine whether you are a viable target. Its movements may appear slow, deliberate, and even curious. It may circle, pause, or stand upright to sniff. This is not a display of aggression, but it is not harmless either. The correct human response is to signal clearly, at a safe distance, that you are aware, organized, and not easy prey. Group cohesion is the first defensive display. People should immediately close ranks, standing together to appear larger and more formidable. Lone individuals are far more likely to be tested. Polar bears, like other predators, evaluate risk, and a unified group signals higher risk. Do not run. Running triggers a chase response and communicates vulnerability. Unlike brown bears, where playing dead may reduce defensive aggression, polar bears interpret retreat as opportunity. Standing firm with deterrence ready communicates resistance. Communication is the next layer. Use loud, firm voices, banging metal, or firing noisemakers if the bear continues to approach. The goal is to break the bear's investigative sequence before it crosses into active predation. Flares are particularly effective in this stage. A handheld flare held high, or a cracker shell fired toward the ground in front of the bear, produces both light and noise, stimuli that bears are reluctant to push through. Field reports show that bears deterred at this stage often veer off and disengage. The critical mistake is hesitation. Deploying deterrence early is more effective than waiting until the bear is only meters away. Distance dictates escalation. If the bear remains hundreds of meters away, noise and visible deterrence usually suffice. If it closes within tens of meters despite your efforts, the encounter has shifted. At this range, calm but deliberate action is necessary. Bear spray, effective within about 8 to 10 meters, should be ready in hand. Studies with brown bears show spray is highly effective at stopping charges. Though fewer tests exist with polar bears, field data from research teams indicate similar outcomes when used at close range. The fine mist irritates the nose and eyes, precisely the areas polar bears rely on most for hunting. In the event that the bear continues to close despite deterrence, last resort measures must be prepared. Firearms, if carried, should only be employed at the point when the bear shows clear commitment to attack, head low, ears back, and charge initiated. Shooting too early at long distance often wounds without stopping and may escalate the bear's determination. Experienced Arctic guides emphasize that firearms are a fail-safe, not a primary tool, and that a calm, accurate response is necessary under pressure. For those without firearms, the strategy shifts to buying time and targeting vulnerabilities. Survivors of close encounters consistently report that striking the bear's sensitive areas, nose and eyes, can break off an attack long enough to escape. While this is obviously a last resort, it underscores a key principle. The bear's body is heavily protected by fur and fat, but its face is not. Even improvised weapons, a shovel, a rock, or trekking poles can be used effectively if aimed at these areas. An often overlooked element of encounter response is the role of posture and pace. Rapid, chaotic movement signals vulnerability, but calm, deliberate repositioning communicates control. For example, slowly moving to higher ground, a boat, or a vehicle while maintaining visual contact with the bear demonstrates awareness. Turning your back or retreating at a run undermines this message. The bear is continuously reading your behavior. Every signal you send contributes to its risk-reward calculation. There are also defensive contexts distinct from predatory ones. A female with cubs may charge explosively if she perceives a threat. These charges are usually brief, aimed at driving the intruder away rather than killing. In such cases, standing firm, using deterrence, and not approaching further is the correct response. Attempting to play dead, however, remains inappropriate with polar bears. Unlike some brown bear encounters, polar bears do not interpret stillness as surrender. They may interpret it as an invitation to consume. Environmental conditions during encounters also matter. In fog, blowing snow, or darkness, visibility is reduced and encounters escalate faster. A bear that appears suddenly at close range may not give you time to deploy layered deterrence. This is why preparation, keeping deterrence on your body, not stowed, is vital. Survivors often emphasize that what saved them was not courage, but readiness. A flare in a pocket, a spray on a belt, a plan agreed upon in advance. Case reviews show that in many successful outcomes, humans who remained calm and organized deterred bears without harm. In contrast, groups that panicked, scattered, or delayed deploying deterrence often suffered casualties. The bear's decision-making window is narrow, and your actions during those first minutes are decisive. There is also a psychological element. Humans confronted by a polar bear often experience tunnel vision, auditory exclusion, and panic responses. Training, whether formal drills or even mental rehearsal, reduces hesitation. Indigenous communities and experienced Arctic guides often practice scenarios, rehearsing the sequence of closing ranks, producing deterrence, and deploying them quickly. This preparation transforms a chaotic moment into an orchestrated response. The overarching lesson is that the moment of encounter is not the time to improvise. The science of behavior, the lessons of survivor accounts, and the recommendations of field experts all converge on the same sequence. Avoid if possible. Group up, signal awareness, deploy deterrence early, escalate methodically, and, if forced, fight with precision at the bear's vulnerable points. Each stage is designed to exploit the bear's natural risk aversion. A polar bear may be the top predator of the Arctic, but it is still cautious. Your goal is to make the bear conclude, quickly and decisively, that you are not worth the energy. Encounters with polar bears are high-stakes moments, but they are not unknowable. They follow predictable patterns rooted in ecology and behavior. By responding correctly at each stage, awareness, deterrence, escalation, you shift the balance of survival in your favor. The difference between becoming a victim and walking away lies not in luck, but in readiness and response. When a polar bear attack occurs, the immediate danger does not end when the bear disengages or is driven away. For survivors, the minutes and hours that follow are often just as critical as the moment of contact. Severe trauma, blood loss, shock, and isolation in a remote Arctic environment combine to create a second survival challenge, stabilizing the injured and ensuring evacuation. What you do after an attack can determine whether the story ends in survival or tragedy. The first priority is safety. Even if the bear has retreated, it may linger nearby. Polar bears are intelligent and persistent. Some have been documented circling back minutes later, testing again. The group must secure the perimeter and prepare for the possibility of a return. This means re-establishing deterrence if possible, flares, alarms, noise, and designating someone to keep watch. In many cases, the safest option is to retreat to a vehicle, boat, or building if available. Remaining in an exposed camp leaves the group vulnerable to a second incident. Once immediate safety is addressed, attention shifts to triage. Polar bear attacks almost always involve crushing injuries, deep lacerations, or both. The bear's jaws are capable of delivering bite forces strong enough to fracture bones. Claws inflict tearing wounds that bleed heavily. The first step is to stop life-threatening bleeding. Field medicine emphasizes direct pressure, pressure dressings, and tourniquets if necessary. A well-prepared Arctic team carries trauma kits with hemostatic dressings, wide tourniquets, and large bandages. Improvisation is possible, belts, clothing, or cordage, but purpose-designed equipment saves time and increases effectiveness. Airway and breathing are the next priorities. Survivors may suffer chest trauma, punctured lungs, or compromised airways from bites to the neck or face. Maintaining an open airway is vital. If the injured person is unconscious but breathing, they should be positioned on their side to prevent airway obstruction. If breathing is impaired, sealing chest wounds with improvised occlusive dressings, plastic, tape, or foil, can prevent collapse of the lung. Circulation and shock management come next. Shock is common after massive trauma, and in Arctic conditions, it is compounded by cold. Even in summer, hypothermia can set in quickly when blood loss is combined with low ambient temperatures. Victims must be insulated immediately. Sleeping bags, insulating pads, and emergency blankets should be used liberally. Dry clothing should replace wet garments whenever possible. Warming is as important as bleeding control. Untreated hypothermia worsens shock and reduces survival chances. Pain management is another challenge. Severe pain contributes to shock, increases heart rate, and accelerates blood loss. Many expeditions carry oral or injectable analgesics for precisely this scenario. Morphine or other opioids, if available under medical supervision, may be life-saving in maintaining stability until evacuation. In less prepared groups, non-prescription analgesics such as ibuprofen or acetaminophen may provide partial relief but are inadequate for major trauma. Communication for evacuation must begin as soon as immediate stabilization is underway. Satellite phones, radios, or emergency beacons, PLBs, in-reach devices, are essential tools in polar bear country. Cell networks are almost non-existent in high latitudes. A distress call should include location, nature of injuries, number of patients, and immediate needs. Time is critical. Evacuation in Arctic conditions may take hours or even days. The more precise and calm the communication, the better the response. While waiting for rescue, ongoing care becomes the group's responsibility. This includes monitoring vital signs, keeping the patient warm, maintaining pressure on wounds, and preventing further deterioration. Rotation of caregivers prevents exhaustion. In small groups, this can be challenging, but organization is key. Survivors of attacks often report that calm, methodical action by companions made the difference between life and death. For those not directly injured, psychological effects are immediate and profound. Witnessing an attack or surviving one leaves people shaken, sometimes unable to act effectively. Leadership is crucial. Someone must take control, issue clear instructions, and prioritize tasks: perimeter security, medical care, communication. Chaos in these moments increases risk for everyone. If the bear has been killed in defense, reporting obligations also begin. In many jurisdictions, polar bears are protected under national and international agreements. Any lethal incident must be documented and reported to authorities. This is not only a legal requirement, but also contributes to data collection that helps researchers and managers understand the circumstances of attacks. Such reporting has improved prevention measures across the Arctic, highlighting patterns such as the prevalence of nutritionally stressed subadults in predatory incidents. Longer-term survival in the aftermath depends on endurance. Evacuations can be delayed by weather. In such cases, the group must ration supplies, maintain camp security, and keep morale stable. Improvised shelters may be needed if tents are destroyed. Fire building and cooking routines should continue to reinforce a sense of order. Psychological resilience is not trivial. Despair or panic can erode the group's ability to sustain care for the injured. For professional teams, scientists, guides, or military personnel, these protocols are rehearsed in advance. Drills simulate attack aftermath, applying tourniquets under pressure, practicing communication calls, rotating night watches. This preparation reduces hesitation and ensures that in real events, actions are automatic. For tourists or less experienced travelers, lack of rehearsal often compounds the crisis. Training in basic trauma care and use of communication devices should be considered mandatory for anyone entering polar bear range. Lessons from past survivors emphasize recurring themes. In multiple cases, bleeding control within minutes saved lives. In others, hypothermia, not the initial wounds, caused fatalities because victims were not insulated properly. In nearly every report, rapid communication for evacuation improved outcomes, while groups without communication tools faced devastating delays. These stories transform into practical lessons. Carry trauma gear, prepare for cold, and never travel without a reliable way to call for rescue. On a broader scale, emergency measures after an attack are not only about individual survival but also about coexistence. Every lethal defense shooting of a polar bear is investigated. Preventing attacks through preparation and deterrence spares human lives and preserves bears that might otherwise be destroyed. But when prevention fails and an attack occurs, survival depends on immediate, organized response. The aftermath of a polar bear attack is one of the harshest tests of human resilience in nature. It demands medical improvisation, logistical planning, and psychological strength under extreme stress. Those who survive often describe the hours after the attack as more grueling than the attack itself. Long waits in cold, caring for injured companions, listening for the possibility of the bear returning. Their stories are stark reminders that in polar bear country, safety is never secured at the moment the bear leaves. It must be secured by deliberate, sustained action until the last injured person is evacuated. Emergency measures are not glamorous. They are not about heroics or last-ditch battles. They are about calm, methodical steps. Secure the perimeter, stop the bleeding, keep the patient warm, call for help, and endure until rescue. This sequence, practiced and ingrained, is the difference between becoming another statistic and living to tell the story. In the Arctic, survival after an attack is not chance. It is discipline under pressure. To speak honestly about polar bears is to recognize two realities that exist side by side. On one hand, they are magnificent predators, highly adapted, superbly efficient hunters, and symbols of the Arctic itself. On the other, they are a genuine threat to human life. When people and polar bears meet, the outcome depends less on chance than on knowledge, preparation, and discipline. The conclusion is not that polar bear country should be avoided, but that it must be entered with respect, awareness, and humility. The essential principle is simple. Prevention is always more effective than confrontation. Every biologist, guide, and local community member will tell you that the safest encounter is the one that never occurs. This does not mean polar bears are inherently aggressive toward humans. Most would prefer to conserve energy and move on. But the pressures of hunger, opportunity, or defense can shift that equation, and humans are not exempt from their predatory logic. By reducing attractants, traveling in groups, and using early warning systems, people dramatically lower the chance of conflict. In polar bear country, small choices, where you camp, how you store food, when you travel, become life-saving decisions. Another truth is that polar bear encounters follow patterns, not randomness. Field records across the Arctic show consistent risk factors. Nutritionally stressed subadults and adult males are more likely to test humans as prey. Most predatory incidents occur during ice-free months. Attacks often happen at night or in low visibility. Recognizing these patterns transforms fear into practical vigilance. Knowing when and where risk is highest allows people to adjust behavior, avoiding carcass sites, maintaining watches in darkness, and preparing deterrents before the bear appears. Yet preparation is not only about protecting people. It is also about protecting bears. Every time a polar bear is killed in defense of human life, it is a loss for conservation. Populations already face mounting challenges from climate change, as shrinking sea ice reduces hunting opportunities. Preventing conflict through deterrence and discipline spares both human lives and bears. Indigenous communities in the Arctic have lived with polar bears for millennia, developing practices that emphasize avoidance, respect, and balance. Their knowledge, combined with modern field research, forms the backbone of safe coexistence. It is also important to remember that polar bears are not monsters waiting at every corner. Many encounters end with the bear veering away, uninterested or deterred by a simple flare or noise. The image of the relentless predator is only half the story. The other half is a cautious animal, finely tuned to conserve energy, making constant calculations about risk and reward. Humans who appear organized, alert, and difficult to exploit tip those calculations in their favor. The difference between safety and tragedy often lies in the signals we send, whether we present ourselves as coordinated groups with deterrence or as solitary, distracted individuals who look vulnerable. The psychological dimension cannot be overlooked. For many travelers, the idea of seeing a polar bear is thrilling. The temptation to move closer, take photographs, or linger for the experience is strong. But curiosity is the most dangerous impulse in polar bear country. Closing distance for a better view risks collapsing the buffer zone that keeps encounters safe. Biologists emphasize again and again, respect distance. The safest way to admire a polar bear is through binoculars, from a boat, or from within a secure vehicle. The closer you move, the more you shift from observer to participant in the predator's decision-making process. Preparation also means mental rehearsal. Just as Arctic researchers drill for fire or frostbite, they practice polar bear scenarios. Who deploys the first deterrent? Who calls for help? Who cares for the injured if the worst happens? Groups that practice respond faster and with less panic. Travelers who rehearse the sequence, stand firm, group together, deploy deterrents, escalate only as needed, are far more likely to stay safe. Survivors often say their actions felt automatic, as if rehearsed. This is not luck. It is discipline paying off in the most critical moment. Living safely in polar bear country also demands respect for the broader environment. The same conditions that challenge polar bears, long fasting seasons, fragmented ice, extreme cold, challenge humans as well. Hypothermia, isolation, and communication failures compound the danger of encounters. Survival is never about a single decision, but about an entire system of preparation: clothing, equipment, medical kits, evacuation plans. Polar bear safety cannot be separated from Arctic survival as a whole. The final lesson is one of humility. Humans often imagine themselves at the top of the natural hierarchy. In polar bear country, that illusion fades quickly. Here, humans are neither the fastest nor the strongest, and technology can only compensate so much. To stand on a tundra beach at night, and see the pale outline of a polar bear approaching is to be reminded of our place in the ecosystem. Respect is not optional. It is survival. Yet this humility brings something else: perspective. When people prepare properly and act responsibly, they not only protect themselves, but also contribute to coexistence with one of the planet's most remarkable species. Polar bears are not enemies. They are apex predators fulfilling their role in the Arctic food web. By learning their behavior, respecting their space, and preparing for encounters, humans can share that environment without tragedy. Every avoided conflict is a success story of conservation as much as survival. In conclusion, staying safe in polar bear country is about layered defense, ecological knowledge, disciplined behavior, group cohesion, effective deterrence, emergency readiness, and above all, prevention. The science, the survivor accounts, and the practices of Arctic communities all converge on this point. The Arctic is not forgiving of mistakes, but it rewards preparation. Those who enter polar bear territory with respect and vigilance often return with stories, photographs, and data. Those who ignore these lessons risk becoming another statistic in the record of attacks. To stay safe is not to fear every shadow on the ice. It is to recognize the rhythms of the polar bear's world and to adapt accordingly. Respect the bear, respect the environment, prepare for the worst, and most encounters will end before they ever begin. In polar bear country, survival is not about dominance. It is about coexistence, discipline, and the wisdom to act before the predator makes its decision. So, what's the takeaway here? Polar bears aren't villains, and they aren't mindless monsters. They're survival specialists, animals that have learned to endure one of the harshest environments on Earth. But that same specialization means that when their world overlaps with ours, the stakes are high. If there's one message to leave with, it's this: the safest encounter is the one that never happens. Prevention, preparation, and respect are always your best defenses. Know where you are, travel smart, keep your camp clean, and have deterrents ready before you need them. Most encounters don't end in tragedy. In fact, when people act calmly, stay together, and show the bear that they're not an easy target, the animal usually decides to move on. But the few seconds where you hesitate, or the small mistakes you make, those are the cracks a hungry bear can exploit. And beyond our personal safety, there's a bigger picture. Every time conflict ends with a bear being killed in defense, we lose one more piece of the Arctic's future. By staying prepared and acting responsibly, we protect ourselves and we protect them. So whether you're a researcher, a guide, or just an adventurer who dreams of standing on Arctic ground, remember this: survival here isn't about conquering nature, it's about respecting it, learning from it, and moving within it wisely. Stay alert, stay prepared, stay humble. Because in polar bear country, that's what survival and coexistence really means. If you found this video valuable, give it a like, subscribe to the channel for more wildlife survival stories, and share it with someone who should see it. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.